Dr. Herker, one of the things that you've noticed in your scholarship and research is that it isn't that unusual for a church or a teaching organization to equip people to do things differently. And that's actually often the focus, the skills, the practices to do more effectively. But you doubt that's going to have the transformative impact on the world, much less the souls, if there isn't an attention to how the being has to change before the doing will rightly change. Could you just explain more about what you mean by doing and being in the proper order, and maybe how one intentionally does focus on the being?
We often teach that doing precedes having, and having then allows us to be. If I do well on this test, I will have the grades that allow me to be successful in life. In fact, it's in the presence, it's in your being, your presence, that you will know as the context changes. The world changes really fast. And if you've learned a way of doing, that way of doing is actually anachronistic almost by the time you've mastered it. The context is changing fast enough that you aren't necessarily certain. You have to come back and learn again what's the next thing to do. Teaching to the test is not education, right? But if you know who you are, if you show up comfortable in your being, then your being will pronounce for you what the thing is that you have to do in this moment. And the having will automatically be added to it. The success isn't in the having, the success is in the integrity of being. How do we show up as integrous beings that reflect our call, our understanding of the world? I remember many, many years ago when I finally was able to understand that I show up in the world as the presence of the possibility of justice, peace, and reconciliation. And so in any circumstance, if these are needed, I know that there's something that I'm called to. I'm called to being. How do I contribute to this reconciliation? I'm just a possibility, right? How do you show up as a possibility in the world that causes your being to be invited into this particular moment? You're never placed into circumstances where your being is not needed. And so if you only know how to do things, then you'll look at certain circumstances and say, well, I don't know how to do that. But if you know who you are, you will know how to be that. And your being will then invite you to a particular doing in the moment, as opposed to we've never done it this way. We've always done it that way. Who are we being in this moment as the times change? And that's so important because the major test is never on the straight line. It's at the crossroads. You have to know who you are at the crossroads. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know what your contribution is, then any road will do. And so it becomes really important to know who you are at every one of the crossroads in your life. And if we can help children to begin to understand for themselves who they are to be, then the doing and ultimately the having will care for itself.